liability at CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, welcome. Good to have you with us. Bill Martinez here. Well, I'll tell you, we've got a very fascinating guest, Judge Mark Boonstra is going to be joining us. Excuse me for just a moment here. He is going to be joining us. He's written just a wonderful 3-volume set about what our founding fathers would think. I mean, it's tough enough. I mean, we're living out this nightmare and wondering what the heck is going on with our country. What's happening to our constitutional republic, this great American idea? And I don't know if it ever crossed your mind, but to think, what would our founding fathers think 247 years later with the America that they turned over to us? Judge Mark Boonstra is with us right now. Judge, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Hi, Bill. Thanks again for having me. Great to be back.
Well, it's an honor, to talk about, this country, this great American ideas that were put together by, founding fathers. And as you noted in your series here, it was an interesting group of people that really got behind this great American idea, right?
Yeah, in a larger group than what most people think of. A lot of people think of Washington, Madison, Jefferson, and whatnot. But what I decided to tackle in this book is anyone who signed one or more of our 3 founding documents: the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the United States Constitution, which turned out to be 118 men.
Wow. Yeah. And the thing is, by the same token, even 118 men. We remind our viewers and our audience, Judge, that it wasn't like there was 100% compliance. I mean, these men were so convicted by what was, lying before them, this opportunity to create and be a part of something that heretofore the world had never experienced.
That's true. Now, they weren't all the same. Some were, like Samuel Adams, were, rebels to the core and were out in front. Others dragged, but ultimately came along. We ended up with 118 men who signed at least one of them, the documents, 2 who signed all 3, and I think 21 signed some combination of 2 of them.
Yeah, and as they were going through this process, this was just absolutely genius, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't like they had a template to work off of, in a sense, although in the other sense they did. They had the word of God, Judeo-Christian principles, right?
Yeah, there was no, like you said, there was no template in the sense of a country like it before. We were something unique, something different. I mean, the world was used to tyrants and monarchs, and sometimes the church itself was involved in the affairs of state. And there were some abuses in the old churches as well. But this was different. They came here because of religious persecution, a lot of them. And they came here and founded a country different than any other, where we expressly recognized that we're a free people and we're free because our rights come from God.
Exactly. And Judge, this is it was so instrumental about the church's involvement, because that was second nature. The understanding that the rights were inalienable, that they came from God, not from government. Past experience had demonstrated to them time and time again, what the government gave, it could willy-nilly take away.
That's for sure. And they tried to set up something different here, where our rights did not come from government, and we governed ourselves, we the people. That was something very unique.
So this series, in their own words, I mean, this thing, as you're developing this, I mean, this is quite a project. This isn't something you did just during COVID. I mean, you sense a number of years and a lifetime of experience involved in the writing of these 3 volumes. So when you first started out to, I believe, I got to tell you, Judge, this is a real gift in light of where we are right now in helping us get back to, as we've been saying time and again, first principles. like anything, like any institution, a corporation, when they've lost their mark and lost their way and they see business on a downturn, they go back and say, okay, when did we make a wrong turn here? And I believe this is where we are today in America, is that we need people like yourselves, books like this, to help us pause and think about a moment. Where was it that we made the wrong turn that is delivering the kind of results that is not consistent with our founding? Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, and you're right. This didn't happen overnight, and it started out as just an idea in my mind, literally about 9 years ago, I would say, when I started really researching and putting pen to paper. But the reason I did is I just even then, 9 years ago, was beside myself, looking at what to me seemed we had strayed very far from what our founding fathers, these 118 men and others, intended us to be as a country. And I was sort of beside myself with what had happened to our country in lots of ways. And I came to the conclusion that there was one fundamental, underlying, overriding reason for all the ways that it happened. And that was that we had lost God.
Yes.
So, God was so fundamental to these men and to the founding of this country that what I really set out to do was to say, look, don't worry what my opinions are. You may not care what my opinions are, but you ought to care about our founding fathers. They established this country, and I think we don't teach it anymore. And I was trying to provide honest, truthful, factual information to the American people about the founding of this nation and the men who founded it. To remind them how central religion was to the founding of this country, and then simply to pose the question in the book, in each chapter, not my opinion, your opinion. What do you think?
Exactly.
Once you learn about this man, and one in each chapter, and once you see in his own words what he said about religion and its place in our society. And then I give you one example from modern day America, where we are today. I just pose the question for the reader to answer for themselves. What would John Adams, what would Benjamin Franklin, what would William Paca, you name it, what do you think of this event in modern day America, and more generally, where we are today as a country? And I got to tell you, I started working on this about 9 years ago. It was an 8-year project. Volume 3 came out, well, it'll be a year in December. I never could have imagined in my wildest dreams how much farther we could have fallen as a nation in those next 8 years. I thought it was necessary to get the word out then. It's even more necessary and timely today, I think.
Well, and that's the thing that I consider. I got to tell you, Mark, is that I consider timing, and just like the founding of our nation, it was God's timing, and I believe the timing of your books is in accordance with God's timeline. And it's up to us, like you said, it's up to us to reconnect with our founding. I say our birthright. I think our birthright is so critical in this as American citizens. In the Bible, we read how important a birthright is. When you consider the story of Esau and Jacob, right? Esau kind of took for granted his birthright and gave it away for a bowl of porridge. And you hear shortly thereafter that God was upset with that. And he expressed it very succinctly by saying that Esau he hated, Jacob he loved. And the manifestation of Esau's rejection of his birthright was an offense to God. And I believe, in a sense, what is happening in America with some people turning their back on God, rejecting their God-given birthright for this country, to be a light, as John Winthrop said, a light to a dark world, I believe insults Almighty God. And there is, I believe there's an inevitable judgment that is forecast for this nation as a result.
Yeah. And I hope, candidly, I'm a humble, modest guy, but I hope God uses this in some way to further whatever purpose he can to right the ship of our country. I have to tell you, the honest truth is, I was working hard to get this done in the beginning, and I honestly didn't realize the scope of what I was taking on with 118 different men and how much it was take. It wasn't intended to be 3 volumes, but it turned into 3 volumes necessarily. But there was a time early on when I said to myself, and I said to my wife, I need to get this out. Maybe I should do a bridged edition or something that I don't have to do all of the research. I can put out, the quotes and that kind of thing. And finally, I said to myself, you know what? I can't cram this into my own calendar. Just do it in God's time. He'll figure out the right time and the right way. And that's sort of how it happened.
Yeah, and here we are. We're talking with Judge Mark Boonstra. His book, In Their Own Words, Volume 1, 2, and 3. Volume 1 is the New England Colonies, and we're going to get into that. Today's Godless America. What would our founding fathers think? Judge, for you, here you are, you're on the bench. You're seeing the reality of what's happened to our country that in this modern culture has turned its back on God. And you see it not getting better. It's getting worse. And as you said, even as you were writing this, what started out as one book and now became, a 3-volume set, I imagine the sense of urgency kept growing in you as you were, developing your ideas.
It did. And the fact that every election I was thinking, I have to get this out before the election. The voters need to see this, but like I say, I did it in God's time. I hope he uses it if the timing is right. As far as the court's concerned, I tell you, we see all kinds of cases, but some of the things that I see that people can do to each other just boggle the mind. How can that happen in a godly world? It's just amazing.
Well, to think, and also, Mark, how fast it's happened here. As you said, you started writing the book and you're thinking there's got to be the sense of urgency, and it's getting worse and worse. I mean, here we are. I mean, we're dealing with, probably now, well over, what we were at 60 million abortions, not counting abortifacients. Abortions we're talking about well over 100 million and counting. That's just in America alone. And when you consider that kind of activity, and we've become a culture of death resulting from that, therefore, and then you have the sexual deviancy and manifestation that's happening all around our country. Our kids are being captured. The public schools are participating in this. They're telling parents that the kids belong to them, which is, I mean, where in the Constitution have they possibly twisted their thinking and the narrative to think that our children belong to them and that they can do anything with the kids, including sex changes?
Yeah. And, sometimes I talk to groups, including a homeschool group recently, and we talked about the book and some of the examples and what to do about it. But, and I say to them, I hate to be overly simplistic, but I think it really is simpler than what we sometimes think it is. Mm-hmm. And I describe it in the book as this is just a continuation of the battle that has been ongoing since Satan fell from heaven. It's a battle of good versus evil. It is really that simple. And we need to fight on the side of good, because right now, evil's on the rise.
Yeah. Well, no doubt, because what's happened is we've moved God out of the culture, and a vacuum will not exist, and Satan's happy to, come in. You say since the fall of Satan. I go back to, Genesis, when God became the first example of a cancel culture, when Satan talked to our parents and convinced them that they could be as gods, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's insane. It's crazy. But
I'd like to think that we as a people, as a human race, we've been around now for how long? Thousands of years at least, right? And you'd think that we would progress and develop. And I'm afraid we're regressing, if anything. And sometimes I think, to be honest with you, we've made so many technological developments. We're on the computer here looking at each other, right?
Yeah, right.
And I sometimes think, to be honest with you, that with all of the advances mankind makes, there's a hubris involved in that. And we start to think we control everything and we manage everything, and we forget about God, that God's really in charge.
Well, and this is why in the Bible it says God laughs. Man makes his plan, God laughs.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, we think we know better. Goes back to that first lie in the Garden of Eden that, we ended up paying a big price. And the thing is that what's happened is that we keep going in this same cycle. We keep repeating, as you say, you would think we'd know better, but it's because we really are not interested in history. And we keep reinventing the wheel. We keep crashing and burning, and we injure people. And I think about, where we are right now, Judge, the lives that are being ruined. For me, where I'm at in my life, I don't know about you, but I look at every day as being precious. And I look at other people and their lives being precious and their moments of life being precious. Why waste it? Why after, the race is ran, that you're going to find yourself in a situation where there's regrets and it shoulda, coulda, woulda, when you finally realize what the truth was and how silly we were to ignore the obvious truth, right?
Right. And ultimately, you and I are a little bit older these days. I hate to admit it, but but ultimately we have to think about our kids and our grandkids
Exactly.
and their kids. And I worry about what kind of a world we're leaving to them.
I'm with you.
And I don't know if we don't care about history, but some of it isn't taught anymore, right?
No. Right.
The truth of history isn't taught anymore. They teach it with the slant that they want to teach with it, and our kids and grandkids don't then have a foundational basis to know, for example, what this country was intended to be when it was founded.
Well, they're purposely being disempowered here, Mark, are they not? Because if you don't have, again, we've lived a couple of extra decades, and what we're speaking from is experience. Yeah. And like I often tell my kids, I said, look, I'm not one necessarily to give you advice, but I can give you experience. I can tell you what's happened to me. And the other thing that they hear from me repeatedly is experience defines preference. So if you're not in the game and you're not experiencing something, you're going to listen to other people to define the preference for you. But, that's not the way God designed the world. God designed it in such a way that it's our own individual preference. It's our own choices. That's what we're going to be responsible for. And even if you say, well, I didn't make that choice, but by not doing anything or staying neutral, supposedly, because some people think, well, if I'm not involved, then it doesn't matter. It does matter, because that is a choice, isn't it?
It is a choice. And I guess I would add to what you said that, the secular left in America these days, and that's the truth of it. And I don't want to get political. I'm nonpartisan, but it's the secular left, the atheist left these days. And this is by design, and this has been happening for decades now by design. They took over education in America. They took over journalism in America. They took over entertainment in America. Mm-hmm. That's what our kids and grandkids hear. That's all that they hear, unless we take them to church and do other sorts of things to make sure they're properly educated ourselves. But if that becomes the source of all of their knowledge, they grow up thinking the way the secularists want them to think, and they forget about, the basic fundamentals.
Well, the thing is, in this information age in which we live in, Mark, as you know, our kids are bombarded with information, but it's up to us as parents, as grandparents, to teach them about critical thinking, because this is not happening in the classroom. Because unfortunately, the classrooms, sadly, in too many places, they've become indoctrination centers as opposed to educational centers.
They have, and I would add to that what I talk about a lot in the books, and what a number of our founding fathers talk about in all of the quotations that I've provided in the books. That look at Benjamin Rush. He's maybe a primary example. He was a signer of the Declaration from Pennsylvania, who became the founder of American medicine. And I could pull out the quote, but I mean, they all talk about how our education needs to be based in morality and virtue, and religion is the foundation of morality and virtue. Rush adamantly advocated for the teaching of the Bible in the schools. Most of these founders studied under the feet of ministers.
Exactly.
Both in their younger days and a lot of them in college.
Well, look what Adams said. Look what Madison, others have said. Franklin, that morality, the things you're talking about, that couples brilliantly hand in glove with the Constitution. if you don't have people that are connected with a moral consciousness, a fear of God, the Constitution is worthless. It will implode on itself. And this, Mark, I'm afraid, is what we're starting to see. We've got to go to quick break. When we come back, we've got more from Judge Mark Boonstra. We're talking about his new book, In Their Own Words. Stay with us. More right after this.
With warmer weather comes the opportunity for outdoor dining, with more people now bringing dogs along to their favorite restaurants and cafes. But is this a good option? I'm Dr. Rena Carlson, president of the American Veterinary Medical Association, with a few tips. First, check ahead with the restaurant to make sure they allow pets in outdoor dining areas. Make sure your pet is healthy and up to date on vaccinations. Is your dog properly trained to sit or lay at your table despite the commotion around them? The noise and activity can be stressful, so if your pet is excessively barking, panting, or drooling, or can't sit still, these are signs your dog is better off at home. Bring Fido's toys, treats, and water dish, but don't share your meal with your dog. Finally, if you've never taken your dog out to eat, try going at a time of day that you will know will be quieter to see how they react, and be prepared to leave early if needed. There's more valuable pet information at avma.org.
Attention timeshare owners. Tired of the financial stress? Were you misled by the salesperson? Don't or can't use your timeshare anymore? If any of these apply to you, then you may qualify for timeshare cancellation and get the relief you need now. Timeshare Defense Attorneys is the #1 affordable fixed-fee legal solution in the country, with an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. That's certainly better than my grades. They even offer a 100% client satisfaction guarantee. Let one of their experienced lawyers evaluate your case and explain the process. If they take you as a client, they'll work on your case until it's resolved in your favor, guaranteed. Expect great service and a close working relationship with your lawyer, keeping you informed every step of the way, protecting your rights, interests, and even your credit. It's that simple. Even a kid like me could understand it. The consultation is free. Call today.
800-296-1332. 800-296-1332. That's 800-296-1332. If you're 65 or older and Medicare is your main source of insurance, pay close attention right now and listen for details on how you may save thousands of dollars on your health care costs. Did you know that Medicare can pay for things like dental visits, home delivery of drugs, even a gym membership? Call us right now and learn how to unlock all your Medicare benefits. Medicare and supplemental plans that we provide can even offer you drug coverage with zero copays and pay for transportation to your doctors. Medicare plans can offer you wonderful money-saving benefits, but you've got to call now. We'll help you get the most out of your Medicare. Make this free, no-obligation call now. Save a ton of money on your health care costs and get the code to unlock all your earned Medicare benefits. Paid for by Senior Choice Plans. 800-796-3954. 800-796-3954.
Well, welcome back. Bill Martinez here. We're continuing our conversation with Judge Mark Boonstra, the Michigan Court of Appeals judge, talking about his new series, In Their Own Words, Volume 1, 2, and 3. The first one is about the New England colonies. Mark, let's talk about Volume 1 specifically and what our audience can enjoy when they get involved and engage with your book, because this is something I believe that I just see families engaging in this, because this is the kind of thing that they should have been learning in school and are not. But this is, in a way, gives us a chance to, do a little bit of a do-over or a remedial opportunity to appreciate what this country is all about. Because if we're going to get this country back on track, we need to get back to first principles, and the first principles of order involve, number one, our relationship with God, and number two, this Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. Do you think?
Absolutely. I got to tell you a story. When these volumes 1 and 2 first came out about a year or so ago, I was talking to a homeschool mom, and she, like so many others, when I was describing this book, was just open-jawed.
Mm.
And she said to me, "Thank you. You have no idea how much time and effort you have saved me, because this is a resource you're not going to get in schools, and it's hard to find, I think."
Right.
One thing I would say, though, because I have come to appreciate 3 volumes, they're all pretty thick. It seems daunting,
Yes.
but I would describe it as both comprehensive in that we're covering all 118 signers,
Mhm.
but yet easy to read and bite-sized, because each chapter is relatively small. It's a biography of between 2 and 30 pages, and a series of quotations and an example from modern day America that's contrasted with that. So really, people can read it in, whatever pace they want, one signer at a time, jump around volume to volume if you want. There's no necessary order, and they shouldn't be overwhelmed by the girth of the series.
Well, it can. I mean, especially if you get all 3 books at the same time, you're going, "Oh my goodness, I'm back in college again." No,
Yeah.
it's okay. Yeah, I mean, there really are bite-sized morsels, and I love that you started again with first principles. You started by laying out the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, the signers thereof that were involved in there, and I got to imagine for homeschool moms and homeschool kids, especially the moms and maybe the older generation, as they read this, it's like the light goes on. It kind of reminds me in a way, when Mark, when I read in the Old Testament and the children of Israel, the temple would be destroyed, and the king would say, "Okay, hey, let's get the temple squared away. Let's rebuild the temple." And the officials would go in, and they'd come back to the king and go, "Oh man, we found this book here. This is pretty odd. I mean, we've really kind of messed up." And the king, in humility, understands that they've messed up, and then everybody begins to become penitent and ask for God's forgiveness because the light came on. And in a way, in not as significant a way, but I think in some significant way, in reading the Constitution, I could see where the light would go on and people would say, "Wow, we have really abused our birthright as a nation. We've offended God by being disobedient to the very gift that he has given us." And so my sense is the same thing, and I just so appreciate that you opened up the series like that.
Yeah, each volume intentionally starts out with a section on our founding documents, and it starts out with an introduction of my own that I've written about the founding documents and how they came to be, but then it includes the full text of the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation and the United States Constitution, because how often do we read those? But I think every now and then we need a reminder. We need to
100%. I agree. We always tell people, like on the 4th of July, Memorial Day, any special holiday, when we have our backyard picnics. This was a story anecdotally that was shared about Charles Kronheimer, a Fox News contributor and writer. And what he would do, I think, was like 4th of July, people would come over and he would have everybody take turns reading the Constitution. And the people commented, even people like Juan Williams, for example, commented that it was such a blessing to experience that and an enlightenment to realize again what shifts need to be made mentally to say, okay, when you read this document, you think, okay, how's my thinking? How am I addressing what our founding fathers had addressed? How does it comport with what I'm reading today? And I think it's very powerful, and it's a habit that I'm encouraging our viewers and our listeners to do on any of these holidays. Put the hot dog for a second, put it down for a second, and come together as a family, as friends, as neighbors, and read the Constitution. And I can tell you personally, when we have done that, this has been such a blessing. And it's like one of those things where people going, how come we're just starting to do this? How come we haven't done this before, right?
Why aren't we doing that in our schools, right?
Exactly.
And one of the things I tried to do in the book, too, is not only include the text, but I've highlighted those aspects of the documents that refer to our creator, for example, that kind of demonstrate with the language that they used how foundational Christianity and religion was to the founders in drafting these documents. You used the word blessings several times just now. The Constitution uses the word blessings of liberty. Well, that's no accident. Liberty was a blessing from God, and they recognized that even in crafting, the Constitution and the Articles are sort of governing documents, so they can be a little dry in some respects when they set up the branches of government, that kind of thing. But even there, in the introductory language, they talked about how it was the blessings of liberty that they were embedding into our country.
Yeah, and the thing that's amazing, Mark, and it's got to be interesting for you, as a judge, as an attorney, and going through the whole process, understanding the rule of law, when you hear and watch people opine about something they know so little about, and you realize really quickly how disconnected, from the rule of law in our Constitution, because we have this sense of, today, this mob rule and this idea, it's almost like, might makes right somehow, that's arising in our culture. And it's like, oi, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's I'm truly concerned about the might makes right idea. We are, I'm afraid, becoming a much more authoritarian, tyrannical nation. And it's the left who is in charge of that right now, right? The so-called anti-fascists, who in my mind are truly fascists. Can we define the left? I mean, the left is it is a real body of people. And for me, where I see them, coming out quite glaringly are these elites, these people. I mean, like, for example, there was somebody talking about journalism and how the journalism schools have been overtaken by the elite universities. And you have this thing, and I think it's roughly, I think they said 39 of the top universities command about 95% of people in media today. And so you got kind of this echo chamber that is commandeered the media element of our institutions. And this is just one, but it seems to be a consistent model, whether you're talking about journalism, whether you're talking about social media, whether you're talking about the government, whether you're talking about bureaucracy, levels of corporate America with some of the things, because you see where the manifestation of these models are exposed and demonstrated to us. And it seems to be consistent. So we call them the left, but what I see as a driving force is this elitism, this idea, Mark, that I know better than you, and you're lucky that I'm born, because if it wasn't for me, you guys can't even figure out, how to fix dinner for yourselves. But this is why I need to be large and in charge, and you need to do what I say, not what you think. That's exactly right. They know better. And therefore they are entitled to tell the rest of us how to live our lives. And if we don't know what to make for dinner, they're going to tell us what to make for dinner, because they know what's best. I don't know exactly how you define the left anymore. I think a component of it is the secularism that we've talked about. But I said to one of my...
It has to be, Mark, because it's godless.
Yeah, it's godless.
It's totally godless. Because if God was in it, they would not be operating in this extreme. They wouldn't be operating for themselves. They'd be operating for we the people, which is the basis of our Constitution. But go ahead.
In the old days, not that many years ago or decades ago, we talked about conservative and liberal. And I said to one of my colleagues the other day, they aren't liberals. Classical liberalism,
right,
all the way down to the Kennedy era. John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and today Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's a pariah in his own party these days, because he's a classical liberal and not the elitist that you're talking about. Liberalism means you believe in freedom at its core, liberty, right? That's the core of the word. These people are not liberals because they don't believe in freedom, at least not your freedom and my freedom.
Right. They don't believe in the freedom that comes from God, because they don't believe in God.
Exactly.
And,
right.
And it's so funny, because what I find them, they will use the words, they capture these words, freedom, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, but they don't mean it. They really do not have the gravitas. They don't have the ethos in their spirits, in their very spirit. All it is, it's a foil to get them to their next progressive step of controlling we the people.
And they use terms like by any means necessary. which I'm not sure they appreciate the hypocrisy of that. But what it means to me is you know the end because we're the smartest, right? We're the smartest. Right. We know what the right outcome is. We know what's right for you more than you do. And we are going to force that outcome by any means necessary. That's a leftist term, right? There's an organization by that, BAMN. And that to me means lie, cheat, or steal, whatever it takes, because we, the elitists, know what's best.
Well, again, there's the contrast, bringing it back into the spiritual element of understanding the things of God and what God represents. God is life. He's love. Without God, then the institutions become godless, certainly, and they become lifeless. In any historical context, when they have been in charge, what is realized is mass carnage and devastation that is incredible. Because when I go back, Mark, and I read in the history books to see what happens when the elitists take over, and they take all kinds of forms, whether it's Marxists or communism, socialism, it all ends up with the same conclusion, doesn't it?
It does. They're all authoritarians. They're all autocrats, right? Because they know what's best more than you do, and more than what God does, and they reject God as a foundation of your liberty to decide for yourself.
Well, and here we are. I consider the cumulative intelligence in this country alone. What are we, about 340 million people? And the cumulative intelligence of 340 million people versus a handful of bureaucrats by comparison? Really? I mean, you're going to match wit with that kind of weight? Because even when you think about how our country began and the cumulative intelligence, yes, we had so many, people who signed the documents, as you write, but there were so many other people behind these people that contributed to the construct of these founding documents.
Yeah, and there are some who you would know their names who didn't make it into the book, sadly, even though I defined our founders very broadly for purposes of this. But it might mean I have to write a volume 4 at some point. I don't know. But people like Patrick.
Yeah, I'll call your wife and warn her.
People like Patrick Henry, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Give me liberty or give me death was not a signer, in part because we didn't have a Bill of Rights embedded in the Constitution when it was adopted, so he wasn't willing to sign it. He was another one who adamantly believed in the promotion of religion and adamantly believed and he sort of lost this battle to Thomas Jefferson, but that we should tax people to support the church. Now, that doesn't mean a particular church. That would mean the church of your choosing. But nonetheless, we should tax people because it's important that we support the church more generally, whichever one you decide to support.
Right, exactly.
But he actually was one of our great founders, and sadly didn't make it into, and maybe volume 4 he'll make it into.
Yeah, well, he's in our Hall of Fame because the thing is that he's going back to God's structure and matter of things. When he structured Israel, there was a system to take care of the priests, the temple, and it was a tax process. So I can see where he did that. You mentioned his commitment to the First Amendment. And I'll tell you more and more, Mark, as I am, I don't know, aging, I guess, I just have fallen more in love with the First Amendment right. And I see that as being so critical on so many levels, especially in light of the cancel culture that we're dealing with right now, which is an absolute obliteration of our First Amendment right. And it astounds me how our government and others will allow, these social media oligarchs and others just to come in and tell you, shut up. You can't say anything. We've had a senator who told men, in Congress that, you just need to shut up and sit down. How dare you? I mean, really, how dare you?
Well, I think the reason the First Amendment has become so dear to you in recent times is because it doesn't exist anymore like it did.
Right.
And it's under assault. And, I don't know what it's going to take to resurrect it. I'm certainly not going to opine on any existing court cases out there, but I think the courts have a role in saying, defining what the First Amendment allows and doesn't allow. and we'll have to see where that goes. But I think that's one of the things our founders would be aghast at if they could look today at how speech is not free and how it's being dictated by the government.
Well, to me, having freedom of speech, that's what I believe enlarges our intellect. It makes us smarter. So if open speech and debate makes us smarter, I think the opposite makes us dumber. Is that fair?
Yeah. So where'd this idea come from that we need safe spaces on our college campuses, for example, right? Yeah. And where did this idea come from? And I'm not expressing any opinions on vaccines or COVID, but where did this idea come from that science is settled and there's only one way of thinking about it? You know what? Science is the art of questioning. We're forever questioning. And sometimes it's found, the earth isn't flat after all, is something most people think it isn't, right?
Right.
Science can be wrong. I mentioned Benjamin Rush. You know what his scientific methods of being a physician were at the time? They were awful compared to what they are today, right? Things change, and it changes through debate and dialogue, something that's no longer allowed in our country, I'm afraid.
Without a doubt, and right now, even what you just said, case in point, we're straddling a line of being canceled. So I'm only saying that because we got to be careful, because I went through a situation here recently. I was in YouTube jail for a while because I made a mistake and talked about a topic that we just have to stay away from. So I'm just as a warning. So again, just a perfect case in point of where we are right now, because the bottom line is we don't become smarter as a result. And to me, that's an insult for this limited time that we have on earth. I want the best I can get out of this existence, and with all the challenges. And I want the same thing for my kids and my grandkids that you talked about, Mark.
I appreciate that you went through that. I've been through some of that myself, in the sense that I've been pilloried for certain things I've written in opinions, and it's been suggested that I've violated ethical codes and that kind of thing. If you do a Google search, you'll see some of that.
Right.
I hope we work through that appropriately, but I think we all have to have some courage, because if we don't show some courage, we're going to get rolled over. And those who want to silence us, you just can't let them get away with it. You need to fight back.
Exactly.
Otherwise you'll get steamrolled. And we can't afford as a country to be steamrolled.
Well, you ask what happened? How did we get here? And I look back not that long ago, Mark, where all of a sudden we had performance trophies. It was a problem with kids getting boo-boos out in the street, or, whatever. And conflicts, parents became overly protective. I don't know, something, some influence over the culture and families came upon it. And then it was further exacerbated, I believe, in these indoctrination centers that we call the public school system. I'm saying that in a general sense. I don't mean to offend any, people, because it's like one of those things. If the shoe fits, you can wear it. If it doesn't, then it's meaningless. You don't put it on. I'm not trying to make you force fit something that doesn't belong to you. It's just by observation, because here we are, as you say, you got to have all these safe spaces. You're paying all this money for kids to be educated at these universities. And it's like, wow. It's like they're being dumbed down. There's no exercise of critical thinking and questioning and that sort of thing. When you and I went to school, my goodness, there was nothing better for me than to, have a good row with a professor. I thought it was brilliant. And the rest of the kids in class, we all got energized and engaged.
Yeah. And these days, all the professors are on the left, right? So,
exactly.
And you get shut down if you voice a contrary opinion, I'm afraid.
Yeah, without a doubt. And all of a sudden, your A becomes an F real quick. They have the power. There's no doubt. And this is the thing that happens when you have a society that can compel you to do things against your conscience that violates our Constitution. In the end run, Mark, we pay for it. As a culture, as a civilization, we pay for, this kind of effect in order to accommodate the so-called elites.
Yeah. And I have to be honest with you, I think those you're talking about, the truth is they hate our country.
Yeah.
And
sadly,
they would never say they hate it, but they hate what it stands for. They hate what it was founded to be. And that's why they talk about transforming it. They want to transform it. And to a large extent, I'm afraid they're succeeding. And that's why we have to fight that. They're transforming it into something of their liking as the elites, where they can control everything. That is not America.
Fundamental transformation of America. I remember watching people applaud, jumping up, down, getting excited. And I'm sitting there going, what does that mean? And why are people applauding? What is it that I'm missing here? And of course, we have found out the gradual progression of the transformation of our country away from the principles, our first principles, founding principles that we've been talking about. Mark, we've got about 5 minutes left here together. And I wanted, actually less than that, maybe 2 minutes left, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of summarize this 3-volume series and how our viewers can get their hands on your book.
Yeah. So like I said, I wrote it because I was concerned personally about what had happened to our country. And I concluded that the reason we had strayed so far from what our founders intended us to be was that we'd lost God. And I'm really just trying to provide people with information and tools to educate yourself so you're in a position to fight back from that. So you're learning about all 118 signers of our founding documents from the perspective of their religious lives, and perhaps more importantly, what they said in their own words about religion and its place in our society. You can get the books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, elsewhere online. There's a website for the book called foundersownwords.com. And you can even email me at foundersownwords@gmail.com, and perhaps I can get you a signed copy.
Awesome. Judge Mark Boonstra, I cannot thank you enough. You are just an absolute blessing. This is a true gift and a work of art, just like the one homeschool mom had shared with you. I'm sure there are many homeschool moms down the road that will be sharing the same sentiment as our viewers as well are sharing. Again, we thank you for being with us. Godspeed, my friend. Take care.
Well, God bless.
You got it. Our thanks to Judge Boonstra for being with us today. For more information and to be a part of this mighty Martinez movement to return to God and to save our country, check it out, BillMartinezShow.com. May God bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. Go and be blessed beyond your imagination. Thanks for being with us.